Yeah, so basically, you've obviously, spear fisherman, but more importantly, like I've seen you everywhere as far as on the YouTube stuff.
Yeah.
Was that something that you kind of had in mind? Was like, I'm gonna really go at this YouTube thing, or I'm just gonna like, what kind of started all that?
I never had a plan to get onto YouTube ever. I moved to the UK at the end of 2015 from Australia, so obviously quite a massive change in diving conditions and opportunities. And I moved at a horrible time. I moved at December, which is the start of winter in the UK, which is really bad. And I was doing a little bit of filming in Australia beforehand, just with GoPros and stuff, for a magazine called Spearfishing Down Under magazine, and we were putting a DVD together. A mate of mine, Tim McDonald, we were putting a DVD on a cover of a magazine every 2 or 3 months or something like that, and we were just putting together death montages, etc., where it's shoot a fish with some music for 8 to 10 minutes, and then the owner of that magazine tried to merge it to an online platform, kind of like a Netflix, but I think it was just the wrong time. It never really took off. We were trying to do better sort of episodes online, and it just sort of fell apart really. And I'd filmed some really nice stuff in Tonga at the end of 2015 because I went there for a 10-day charter. And I basically got to the winter in the UK. I didn't have a job for a couple months, and I was just sort of like, waiting for bank accounts to get rolling, because, you can't get a flat until you've got some way to pay the rent, and you can't pay the rent unless you've got a bank account to pay the rent, and then you can't get a job unless you've all that sort of crap. So I had nothing to do. So I thought, well, I'm just going to edit my spearfishing footage, and I was, trying to do something with it. I thought, this sucks. I was just, looking at all this footage that I've got that's really cool. And then one day I thought, oh, I might as well give YouTube a go, stick it up on YouTube. I felt really bad for filming all this really great stuff. Well, I thought it was great, and not actually sharing it. And I thought, well, stuff it. I might as well do something with it. So basically at the start of 2016, I thought, I might give it a go. And so I just started putting up a few old clips that I'd edited for this magazine, 5 years prior sort of thing. And a few people watched them and stuff. And then I was really bored with my electrical job and thought, well, I know how to use a camera a little bit. So I started looking for video jobs. And so I wasn't quite qualified enough to get straight into that field. So I do what most people do these days, try and self-educate. And so I sort of spent more and more time on YouTube looking at sort of people doing photography and videography type tutorials. And then one thing led to another. And I was like, well, nobody's doing any sort of spearfishing presented in a way that's kind of more personable than just here's some dead fish. Well, very, very few people were doing it or doing it very well. So I thought, well, this is a great opportunity for one, me to upskill myself, two, use my footage that I've got, and three, just do something other than sit around in a pub in London for the winter when I didn't have a job or wasn't doing anything else. So I kind of just used it as a little avenue to change career paths.
Well, what kind of triggered you moving to London?
Well, my wife and I both, we'd been married three. Actually, I think it was only 2 years. We were married 2 years in Brisbane, and my electrical job, I'd been made redundant because the company was going downhill. I had a massive payout, so I had a large pile of cash, and we thought, let's apply for our British passports, because both our mothers were born in England, and my wife's sister had already been over here for a couple of years, and we thought, let's give it a go. We'll go travel, see something. Applied for our passports. 2.5 weeks later, British citizens, and just thought, let's give it a go. So it was either financial stability, kids, white picket fence, or I don't know, have a bit of fun. So here we are on the have a bit of fun end of that story.
Yeah, there's always time, I mean, I do the I'm trying to do the white picket fence thing now, but like I had a pretty good run there. My wife and I,
double income, no kids sort of thing.
Right. Well, I look back and I was like, man, if I only knew, like I was just going for it, I probably would have been. I mean, I got a lot of really good memories, but man, I don't know what I did with all that money. Like,
Yeah, exactly. I look back at it now. I'm like, I'm not really the most financially stable person, but at the end of the day, I could get hit by a bus tomorrow. So I know you got to live your life, I guess. So yeah, 4 years later, the desire to maybe have a white picket fence in the future is creeping up a little bit now. So 4 years in Sin City is gets to you eventually. But yeah, so I thought while I was here, I might as well make use of my time, try and upskill myself, and I just started making videos of my old previous footage. And yeah, that's sort of how I started kicking on with the YouTube thing, really.
when you were doing your videos, were you thinking about like search engine optimization? So like when people make these things, like they're like trying to make a business and they're going for it.
Yeah,
And
sure.
did you do any of that too, or were you just
Um,
very organically trying to start, just put your stuff down?
I think when I started, like most people, you have no idea, and you just try and basically just make content that people like. I remember I've got like screenshots on my phone when I was looking at some videos I posted up, and I was like, "Yeah, I hit 1,000 views in 1 week," sort of thing. It was quite different back then, and I think getting the first sort of 1,000 subscribers was the most difficult journey out of my YouTube career so far. I think it took me probably like nearly a year to get 1,000 subscribers. I didn't really tailor them for trying to get views, something that I just wanted to make stuff that I was doing. So I think one of my first videos I did abroad, I went down to Brighton. I don't know if you've ever been to London, but it's like the closest beach to London, south of London, on a train by about 2 hours. I went there and I shot a few mullet and I saw some bass. I shot a little flatfish about, a foot long sort of thing. And I was absolutely stoked because I'd got my gear posted over from my dad and I'd jumped in the water, new country, coldest water I'd ever dived, and here I was shooting mullet, something you'd never touch in Australia. And I just sort of captured that essence on my video, I think, and I had a lot of people say, like, really great, amazing spearfishers from around the world. I think one comment that stuck in my head from Yerasimos Kavadias. He's a Greek guy. I don't know how to pronounce his last name correctly, but I think he was runner-up or third at he was third at World Championships that I went to in Greece. And he said, this is the most sort of real spearfishing video ever, because it just shows that anyone can go out and have a go and have fun, and it's not always about diving 40, 50 meters like these guys are always doing. It's just, I don't know, and I got quite encouraged to go, hey, well, I might not live in a place that's really exciting for spearfishing as far as people are concerned, the UK, but if people like watching something that's real, I think I'll try and just capture what's real. And I think from when I started out, I never wanted to be like, oh, look at me, I shot a huge fish. My most successful videos have been about failures, honestly. The first video that sort of kickstarted my whole sort of channel really was I went to Norway and went looking for halibut for a week, and I organized the majority of the trip with another friend here, and sort of got people over from Australia. They just had to get off the plane and rock up. I did all the emailing, the flights, say get here this time, did all the groundwork, didn't get a fish. And I think people really resonated with that fact, because everybody's gone on a trip where you don't get the fish that you're after, and you see your buddies get the fish and you're like, oh man, that's humbling. So I think people really just like the fact that, I didn't win as such, nobody always likes to see someone that always succeeds, because it's not really real. So that's kind of maybe why people like my videos, I guess, because I feel I'm not trying to hide anything if I stuff things up. I made a whole video about how I stuffed a competition up, and people were like, oh, that's cool, because I make the same mistakes. And if people can learn from it, that's really cool. So, yeah.
Well, that was the one thing I agree 100% with what you're saying, is that your, channel, or when you're on the video, it's like very, very genuine. Like you can tell you're yourself, and it seems like you're having a good time doing it. But the funniest thing is exactly what you're talking about. Like when you shot, I think, the halibut, and your buddy let go of the line, or let go of the gun.
Oh, I gave him my spare gun. Yeah, so he basically put a spear into it. He was using a pea shooter from Finland because although they're quite close countries, Finland's doesn't really have any coastal. Or they've got the Baltic Sea, but most of their diving's done in lakes, and they're shooting 500-gram redfin perch, etc., and maybe the odd zander, maybe 3 kilos, etc. So they're not after big fish. They're not geared up for it. So he's basically shot an elephant with a pea shooter, for lack of a better term. And his spear wasn't in, so I gave him my gun, and yeah, he shot the fish with my gun, which had a reel on it, and then he pulled his first spear out and forgot to hold on to the real gun, and it swam off with my gun still in its head. Yeah, it was a heavy day.
Yeah, and then the other thing, because I've done trips too with my friends, and it's like everybody assumes because you like the trip leader or you put it together, that like obviously you're going to get the biggest fish, you know. And like,
it doesn't always happen at all.
Right. I went down and I remember I look up and my friend yells, he's on the boat and he's got this monster like kingfish or yellowtail. And I'm like, wow, you know, well done. And then right after that, I shoot my personal best yellowtail kingfish at that time, and it ripped out and I lost it, and I get on the boat and everybody's got these massive like fish. And I'm just like, I was actually applauding, just like, well, it's not all about you sometimes, Brett, you know? Like it was just really cool to actually see your friends like stoked, and then the reality of the situation, right? Like exactly what you're talking about. You do everything. It doesn't mean you're going to get a fish. Yeah,
I think that's one of the beautiful things about spearfishing is, as much as line fishermen like to say that it's cheating and you're always going to get a fish, it's not always the way the cookie crumbles when it comes to spearfishing. So yeah, I think a lot of people resonated with that and thought, you know, that's like just a lot of people wouldn't put a video out. Well, I feel may not put a video out if you don't get anything. And I guess that video was probably the one that started my YouTube career. And then I followed it up shortly with a video from Tonga where basically we spent a whole day getting fish eaten by sharks or breaking gear, just the amateur hour all over. And yeah, that was I just did everything wrong. I borrowed a spear gun off a friend. I added some wings to it. I thought, yeah, it's fine. I'm a good shot. And just first day, I missed probably maybe 25 kilo wahoo or something. It was extremely clear water as well, so you know I can't just blame the gun. But once you sort of got used to shooting the gun, I could hit fish with it. I shot a job fish with it later in the week. But yeah, just all that sort of stuff that I think people really say, yeah, that's actually what happens out there. And I got lucky. I actually ended up getting a dog tooth about 30 kilos at the end of the day. But yeah, not an easy path to success anyway.
That's great. So you moved to England. You went from Australia to England now, and I love the fact that I always have the mindset, no matter where I go, I'm always going to have a good time. I'm going to find a way to surf, to dive. It's all kind of a state of mind, and if there's a body of water, there's potential there. You know.
Yeah, 100%.
For anything, like.
Yeah.
But I understand you had sinus issues before, and you had surgery on that, right?
Twice.
What was, can you kind of, because I know a good friend of mine is having issues right now. He's getting ready to have a surgery, but what was your issue?
I basically got to the point where I would dive, and I don't know what sort of equalizing technique I use. Some days I can hands free, some days I pinch my nose, but you know, just the generic sort of pinch and blow, it wouldn't sort of clear above my eyebrows, which is quite painful. And I think the first operation I had, the doctor didn't really quite understand my issue. I was maybe like 19 years old or something like that. And I'd come out of, or maybe 21, I think, or 20 years old when I first got that operation. I would come back from a dive trip sometimes, and I'd get up in the boat and I'd take my mask off, and I was like, oh, my mask has got like blood around the lip of it and the ring, because you'd blow and you could just feel blood vessels bursting. And then I got recommended an ENT, an ear, nose, throat specialist that actually does stuff with diving, and he took a CT scan of my face and basically saw that on my left side of my sinuses, it was quite constricted up above sort of the bridge of your nose to your eyebrow area there, the bone structure there. It's very fine, delicate bones up there. That was kind of a little bit squished, and I suffered a lot from sinusitis and sort of allergies and that sort of stuff, and I still get them here. But yeah, so he basically bored those out above my septum to the top, and I remember the second operation, I had packs up there, and then I got them removed about a week after, because you're supposed to do these sinus flushes with a bottle. I don't know if you've probably done those sort of things before. And I'm like, yeah, the water's just not going through, man. And he's like, let me have a look up there. And there was supposed to be some dissolvable packing up there and stuff, because they cauterize all your skin up there, so you've got, you know, little bits of bone and flesh and all that. And I remember he got some forceps up there, and I nearly passed out. He basically pulled these things out about 2 inches long that were just congealed blood, bone, and that sort of stuff. And I was like, I clearly remember that. I can breathe again, and I could taste like, oh, everything. I could smell. My sense of smell is amazing now, because I hadn't been able to smell for a week, sort of thing. And yeah, then he said just stay out of the water for a couple of weeks. I remember the first time I went diving, I was like, okay, here goes nothing, and my nose was still a bit tender, but I went diving, and it was an amazing feeling that I just touched my nose, blew, and it was just, you know, sinus is clear, not a squeak, not a sound, just nothing. And it was like that for maybe 3 years. And then I don't know what happened. I think I got a bad sort of sinus infection, and then I haven't been amazing since. Like, I still have some days where I can hands-free equalize to 100 foot, and then other days I have to really press hard, but there hasn't been a day in the water where I've had to get out of the water because I couldn't dive anymore. So, you know, there's still a bit squeaky some days. You know, obviously, I was working a lot on construction sites as an electrician, and in the UK particularly, you do a lot of chasing into concrete walls and brick walls and stuff like that, because all the homes are brick and that, and so that really wrecks your sinuses, all those building dust. Yeah, the concrete dust is alkaline. Yeah, it attacks your vessels, and that just irritates you and that sort of thing. So yeah, the operation I had was called septoplasty and fess. So yeah, I think, yeah, that definitely changed it for me. So I can generally go on a dive trip, and short of having a full-blown cold, I'm always going to be able to dive. So I never really had too many problems with my ears, though. If I ever had problems with my ears, like not being able to clear an ear, it was always just dehydration for me. I've had that. One time I was diving a state titles off the Southern Barrier Reef once, and I remember I was swimming really hard, and the water was quite warm. When I say warm, it was 26 degrees, so quite warm. And I remember diving, went to dive on a coral trout, and I was like, oh, both my ears are locked up. This is weird. I've been totally fine all day. And then I was like, oh, 3 hours in, been swimming really hard, haven't drunk any water. So then I got a Gatorade out, drank that in 2 seconds flat, swam around for 15 minutes, fine for the rest of the day. So yeah, I think dehydration is a really big cause of bad sinus.
I loved on the last video, by the way, it reminds me of your last video where you had your buddy call in on the yellowtail when you did the tips for the yellowtail.
Oh yes, young Harry, yeah.
Yeah, that was a good little a little addition to the video too. That was good stuff.
To an otherwise quite boring sort of. I didn't really like making that video, but I had a lot of people saying they wanted something about kingfish. And I was like, oh well, for where I'm from, we don't really shoot them too much, so I didn't actually have a lot of footage. But I thought, well, I know if it helps someone, that's kind of good. So I guess your question, do I tailor footage for videos for people? Somewhat. I make the stuff that I want to make. I wouldn't make a video unless I want to do it myself. And personally, I get a lot of joy. I just get a lot of joy and satisfaction when I get a message from someone that says, "Hey, I watched this video. One of your tips in there really helped me, and I landed this fish. I'm so happy." I was like, you know, that's a really cool feeling. You know, you get 10,000 people watching a video, you might get one message every month or every 6 months about that sort of stuff. But you're like, you know, that's, I want to make, I wouldn't say like a difference in a way that I'm doing something humanitarian or anything like that, you know, but like, it's nice to give something back to a community and help people, because I'm not sure what it's like in the States, but I imagine you get some of those older sort of divers that are phenomenal, but they don't want to help anyone. And That's
we have
fine.
plenty of-
Yeah, you get that sort of typical old grumpy diver, and that's fine. Each to their own. No one's obliged to help anyone, but I just feel that it's something I can do. I enjoy helping people out, and I think globally, spearfishers have a stronger voice. It's probably not a bad thing. Or the other thing is safety as well. Like people just watching a spearfishing video, or seeing how to do some things in the right way. There was a really, really sad case in the UK. I think it was 2 or 3 summers ago. Some guys in the club that I was with had to go look for a missing spearfisher in a very new beginner sort of spot. Maybe like less than sort of 8 meters deep. So like 25 foot, like not deep by any stretch of the imagination. But they found this man with his spear gun attached to his wrist with a lanyard attached to the gun with nothing else, and the spear was stuck on the bottom in a piece of kelp or a rock or something he'd fired, and then couldn't get to the surface and get it off his wrist, which is incredibly tragic story. But the parents basically said, "Oh well, everyone dives like that. That's how it's done." And I just when I heard that, I was like, "Oh man, if you need to sort of." I think for me, for someone that's been diving for a while and survived 15 years, because it is quite dangerous, for me, I felt like a bit of an obligation to try and give some educational tips on how to dive safe or how things are done. This is how you set up your stuff. You don't attach anything to you, that sort of thing. So not that I'm saying I'm a hero in teaching safety, and that's not sort of what I want to do is like, doing courses and that sort of things. But I think if people see things done right, if they're going to emulate anything, they may as well emulate something that's not as dangerous as something they just hear off the street. So,
yeah, it's actually interesting. That's a good kind of a topic. I was talking to Nick from Spear Channel actually yesterday about it. I think this week about it, where too many times I feel like with us, I say with us, but our community, you see young guys, and they post things, and they may be, and Nick was telling me this, like it may be an out of season fish or something, and people just like, we in the States will say like kook or whatever, and like,
yeah, sure,
and just bash on these kids. And my thing is like, I remember when I was learning, and I had a friend who was older who mentored me on a couple of things, but for the most part, it was all trial and error.
For sure,
and
yeah.
Wouldn't it be great? Like you're saying though too, it is a safety thing a lot of times, and like I wish what a great opportunity to be in this position where I have knowledge, that I have learned. And how great is it to share it with someone, and then they just seem to have a better time. They're safe,
yeah,
and
sure.
they appreciate. It's nice. I just feel like it's so much better to give than and then it just seems like it's karma or whatever you want to call it. But it's awesome to be in a position to help people like that.
I definitely like helping people. That's kind of one of my personalities. Is I tend to help. I just I help friends out. If someone called me up, I'd go out and help them out if I could, or anything like that. And I think it's in a position where I am, that I've got quite a large audience that I'm delivering to. I think it's almost I'd be silly not to sort of help people out. And I've also had some people criticize helping new divers out. I'll let them figure it out themselves. It took me 10 years to learn that. I'm like, yeah, well. Back in the day, they also used to take things with a horse and cart, but just because that's what your forefathers did doesn't mean that that's necessarily the best way to do things anymore. And I know that's probably, a millennial or whatever deal for people to say that's, oh, I want it now. But, if you can, from my experience as well, is people that get quite protective about, I don't want to train somebody because they're going to shoot all my fish. I can tell you, I've been on so many dive trips where you've got someone that has been diving a few years, can not competently dive, but that ability to hunt, I guess, is something that you can't really teach in a video too easy. You have to go out, and there's some things you can't do unless you do it, like riding a bike. You can tell someone, yeah, balance on a bicycle. If you stick someone on a bicycle that's never been on a bicycle, they're not riding it the first day. You know, it's just some things you have to do. And I've been to many dive places. I remember this one time we were diving for a fish called a barramundi, a bit of a ledge that sort of slopes down, a lot of mud on it. And I would go down to about 10 meters, 30 feet or something like that. And I would sit there and there'd just be schools of barramundi going past. I'm like, oh man, why isn't this guy shooting one? And so I shot one and he's like, oh, where'd you get that? I said, man, I just sat on the bottom, big school. So he dives in the exact same spot. No, I didn't see anything. I was like, okay, cool. I had another dive, exact same spot, a couple minutes later. Big school coming past. I'm like, oh, geez, is this guy going to get one? Anyway, I said, oh, mate, let's dive together in the same spot. You follow me down and make sure you're on the bottom. Follows me down, and I'm sitting there. I'm like, where's this guy gone? And I was like, all right, maybe about 10-foot visibility, 3 meters, and really short guns looking for these. I'm like, there's a big school of barramundi all over me. Where is this guy? Like, all swimming in front of me. And then I see him just swim about. I was like, what's that above me? And he's just cruising 2-3 meters off the bottom above me, just swimming in the middle of nowhere. I'm just like, I got to the surface, I'm like, mate, like, were you on the bottom? Yeah, I was right on the bottom. I'm like, I saw you, mate. You swam over me. Like, I don't know. It's just, there's just fish everywhere, and sometimes you can lead a horse to water, but they're not always gonna get the stuff. So, I think when people get upset about teaching people how to shoot fish or spearfishing techniques and that sort of stuff, there's a lot of practical application that's not going to come from a video. You can point someone in the right direction, but sometimes they just got to go out and do it themselves. And it's the other classic example is a competition, swim off competition that you do anywhere. Everyone's got the same ocean, the same set of legs, and they're all starting the same spot. Someone's always going to have more fish than someone else, and that's generally through experience, not just latest gear or they watched a video on something. So yeah, I think it's good to teach people how to do things, but gets to a certain point where you can't teach anymore. They have to go out and do it themselves. So yeah, I'm not too worried about people shooting all my fish that I don't actually own. It's just an ocean that I swim in. So yeah, that's my take on it.
No, I agree. I would say I'm not insecure about my spearfishing or whatever you want to call it. I don't really care. A lot of it is just time in the water. I mean, like you said, I know that from watching my son, trying to teach my son how to dive and telling him, okay, we're here, there's bait, just do a real slow dive, and then it's just whoosh, splash, 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 splash.
You around like a maniac.
He shoots down, comes up, like breathing all heavy. I didn't see anything. And I'm like, hold on.
Really?
Yeah. So I dive down and I shoot this really nice bass, and I come up and he's like, I don't get it. I'm like, look, your heart rate is through the roof, everything about you. It's like you just kind of have to let it go and just enjoy everything. And then all of a sudden I started seeing all these fish,
What sort of bass are you talking about when you say bass? Is that a striped bass? Is that a white sea bass?
For this was just my son, so it was just a striped bass, like a calico bass we have in the kelp here.
Is that different to those big stripers they get off New Jersey and New York and that sort of stuff?
Yeah, so
that's a different fish.
Right. That's the East Coast. They get different. I guess we've actually had a few of them here. I know somebody that shot one pretty close by, but they're really rare. Okay. Most of our bass is white sea bass, which is kind of like your mulloway.
Yeah, it's more like a pterogalin actually, because it's got a concave tail. The tail goes in, the mulloway goes out like a paddle, and you got much smaller scales on a white sea bass. Just from it's a big croaker anyway. That's the same sort of thing, but they get massive. Do they have an orange mouth on the inside?
Sea bass, not so
white
much.
sea bass.
Okay, because the little tragdew, we call them in Australia, or pterogalin, they have a really orange mouth. That's how you tell them apart from a mulloway when they're really small, if you have no other way of identifying them. So,
yeah.
I'm familiar with that. Oh, I mean, I don't know how the mulloway are. Are they like white sea bass, where they're so extremely skittish? where if you clear your ears, they can get spooked at a depth sometimes.
Some days, like any fish, you get smart ones and dumb ones. When they're in a big school, they tend to be a bit easier to approach. I've got some quite cool footage of them vortexing up. I'm not sure if the white sea bass do that, but sort of maybe just a ball of mulloway, sort of 100 fish sort of thing, just sitting doing a spiral, shoot one, swim to the surface. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, we usually we pretty much hunt them in the kelp.
Yeah, I've seen a few videos of that. It looks cool.
Yeah, it's in the kelp, and it's during spring times when they start to spawn, so you see them. But what happens during that same time, it's really bad viz usually.
Okay.
It's real cold, and they like to hang out right about the thermocline.
When you say cold, how cold's cold?
Well, for us, it's in the high 50s for us. So I guess I don't.
What's that in real money?
16. I mean, we need to get on board with the rest of the world. I'll tell you that much. I think it's about, what is it, 15 C maybe? I don't know.
Yeah, that's not too tropical.
Yeah. Well, it's like, yeah, it's what's 17 C? I think that's like 68. So
yeah, okay.
Yeah, so it would be like probably a 14 C maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, that's not the warmest. Yeah, that's normally what the UK is for a fair bit of the year, actually.
Yeah, it's probably like that. Very similar, I'm sure.
Except there's not massive white sea bass swimming around in our waters.
Yeah, well, the thing is too is the sketchy thing is with the sea bass, you can see a correlation. Yeah. And there's no visibility.
Yeah. Do the whites go into the kelp though? Is that something?
It's funny, for the longest time, I know a bunch of my friends and I, that was like the false sense of security.
In the kelp, yeah.
So they showed a, video of a big white just plowing through the kelp.
Didn't care. Just loved it.
Yeah, but they're there. I mean, it's not bad when there's good viz. None of that stuff really bothers me. Like we were talking about, because I've dove a lot in the tropics too, and I've seen a big, massive tiger shark come on. If you can see them, it's not a big deal. But I
still don't like big tigers that much
because they're unpredictable and they're just massive. But with no viz, I mean, if that shark's coming, it sees a silhouette and it's coming. There's not much you can do about it.
Yeah, definitely.
Where usually if they see you, they don't really that interested, and you have a good sporting chance, so to speak, of like them just going okay and leaving. Yeah. So I know Australia has their fair share of sharks.
Yeah, there's a fair few sharks there. I didn't really miss them the last time I was back. I was like, oh, damn it, sharks again, because it's quite, in Europe anyway, there's not a high chance of running into a shark. Although they say the UK doesn't have any whites, but the water's the perfect temperature. There's a large population of seals everywhere. So I can't see why they wouldn't be there. Apart from they might not have a reason to migrate to that area to sort of stay there.
Yeah, not to get off topic, but it's pretty wild too because of everything they've kind of learned about them. And the last few years, where these hot spots for great whites that nobody even knew about till they started tracking them. Yeah. And, back in the 50s and 60s here, everybody would go dive like Terry Moss for those big tuna down in Guadalupe Island.
Yeah, that's where they get the whoppers there, isn't it?
Yeah, and so then all the sharks are there, and it was just like, now they realize it's seasonal, which is kind of interesting too. It's like very seasonal. So if you can time it right, you got a good shot, of like getting on some solid fish without the sharks. But
yeah, it is. I do like the comfort of sort of going out and not running into sharks. Although a couple of guys here have run into a port beagle shark, which I think they're very similar to an Alaskan salmon shark. They kind of look like a comical great white with an unusually large eye. Yeah, like I don't think they feed on mammals typically, but yeah, some guys have seen them off. There's one particular spot on the south coast of England that sort of sticks out sort of a fair way and quite deep water around it where you dive sort of these ledges and they can go down to about 25-30 meters and then it falls off to about 50 and people catch them on rod and line there as well a little bit. But yeah, that's probably the only thing you've got to worry about a little bit, port beagles. But at the end of the day, yeah, it's probably probably not the worst shark to run into.
Yeah, I mean, I always look at it like if everybody in the water, because I surf a lot too, and like how many shark attacks are there? Um, if you know, when I was growing up diving, I'd always be scared. I'd always watch Shark Week, and it'd always be in my mind, And then I just told myself, like, number one, I'm not watching Shark Week anymore because I just don't want that in my mind.
Yeah, for sure.
And number two, look, you're either going to get in the water and enjoy it, and let go and just whatever, or stop diving. Well, I'm not going to stop diving, so I don't care anymore. That's kind of my attitude towards it. So,
that is one thing I have thoroughly enjoyed about Europe is the lack of predatory animals in the water.
Yeah. Well, it's funny watching that Tonga video that you had with the dog tooth, and that was like the story of my friends and I's like whole trips down in Guam. We go to these spots, and they would just get lit. You see these, dog tooth are just they're my favorite because it's the most humbling experience.
Oh yeah, they will sort you out very quickly.
Everything's got to be on point, and I love it about those animals. But man, did you notice so I've noticed this, when we would go out, we would shoot a I say a large dog, but depending on your scale, but like, let's say 25 kilograms or.
Yeah, decent fish.
Yeah, decent fish. A lot of the sharks would leave it alone and run away from it, and not bother it. When we'd shoot a smaller grade dogtooth, the sharks would just immediately annihilate it. Have you seen that at all when you were in Tonga, or they just didn't?
We did. Smaller ones did attract a little bit more attention, but we tried not to shoot those after the first 2 days. But what we did definitely notice is fish shot in the head that weren't stoned got eaten a lot easier, because we had this theory that they couldn't sort of snarl and swipe their head around as much, whereas we started shooting them in the tail like you'd shoot a Spanish mackerel, because I just sort of heard from a few people, quite experienced guys. They said, oh yeah, shoot them down the back, in the back third. I was like, you serious? It's very tempting when you see that massive dogtooth head. You're just like, I'm gonna shoot you right in the face. And but yeah, the one I purposely shot, the one that I did as far back as I was comfortable with aiming with that big gun, and it came to the surface 5 minutes. It was done. I had another mate of mine at the Coral Sea. I think he shot one maybe 75 kilos or something, 150 pound, 160 pound. Shot it right in the tail. It was on the surface in a couple of minutes. Just you take out the propeller, and they can't really swim too much. So
yeah, it's a good. I've heard that from Mark Healy too. With just watching one of his videos, he was talking about that with wahoo tail shot, because it's a good holding shot, and it's a leverage they can't like.
Yeah, you miss the gut cavity as well then, particularly on wahoo.
Yeah, when you're pulling them up, it's funny because those fish have like a really big air bladder. So when you start to pull them up quick, they have that initial run.
Yeah, they just rise up, don't they?
And then they just kind of go for it. Like once they start going, just pull them up. Like tuna, it's scary. Like we've gotten bluefin tuna. We get bluefin tuna here, and that thing is so dangerous because even if you pull it up and it decides to turn its motor on, it's going.
Yeah,
Where
that's the end of it. Yeah.
It seems like with a dogtooth, there's a big fight, and then it's over.
If you can get it in one piece and on the way up, the dogtooth, once it gets to the surface, it's pretty cactus. But that's. Oh, sorry, I forgot that cactus isn't a word that's used anywhere else outside of Australia to describe something that's broken or dead. I realised this recently.
I've spent a lot of time on British ships with guys, so I've gotten pretty well versed on pushing in the queue and all this other stuff.
Oh, right. Okay.
Pardon me, what? He's like, yeah, I'm pushing in the queue here. I'm like, oh, you want to get in the line? Okay, cool.
Yeah.
A question though, like, with you, the one thing that's unique, I think, about you and your situation is you've gotten into spearfishing, you're in Australia, you're diving, you're from there. Then you go to the UK and you're going to areas that are not really that common. And you're showing, like when you're going for halibut, not that many people started doing that. It's kind of unique, rare footage. So I think that's what helped get a lot of attention.
I think that's also due to the large viewership that is the United States, and that's a very iconic fish for the States on both, you know, Alaska and the West Coast as well. Is there a halibut on the West Coast? There's a and then you've got the Pacific halibut as well.
Yeah, we have a smaller, and then we have the big Alaskan up in Alaska. We got the giant halibuts that get relatively like, you know, two big barn door looking things like.
Yeah, and I think that's probably why people really like that, because typically those things, from what I understand in Alaska, are very dirty water and very deep. And whereas Norway, second time I went back, I could spot a halibut in 20 meters of water, no problem, if it was big enough. And you always sort of think that, it's a halibut, it's going to be very highly camouflaged, but I'll tell you what, as soon as you see a whopper, there's no mistaking it, because that massive triangular tail just sticks out like nothing else. So you're sort of straining your eyes going, is that a halibut, is that a halibut? But as soon as you see one, you're like, okay, that's a halibut. So, yeah.
Describe that a little bit more, like you said, the triangle tail.
Because it's such it's such a sharp tail shape on a halibut, because it's a large triangle, but it's very square cut, so it really sticks out against the bottom when you're looking at it, versus when you look at, say, a plaice or like a round flounder type fish. It's got a round tail and they tend to bury a little bit more. I don't think the big halibut, they're too big to bury. They don't bury. They don't care. They just sort of sit there and pretend to be a rock instead. They're like, I'm not going to bury. I've never seen a halibut buried ever. With sand on it, they've always been sitting on the surface. Whereas plaice, sole, Dover sole, lemon sole, flounder, and turbot, and brill as well, trying to get all the flatfish that we get over here, they're often very buried under the sand. Maybe it's because they're smaller or something like that. But yeah.
So how did you, so maybe you can talk everyone through
how I ended up there.
Yeah, how did you do it? Like, how did you decide I'm going to go here and dive,
Well, basically, in 2014, my friend Bryson went to Peru for the World Spearfishing Championships, got a bit hooned with some Finnish guys on the last night, and flippant comment, if you're ever in Australia, look me up. My friend Bryson works, sort of, at the time, I think he was doing 6 on, 6 off, weeks on off, and he was on the west coast of Australia, and he's like, my Finnish friend's coming over to stay, and can you host him because I'm away? I was like, sure. So I was working 6 days a week at that time, so I hooked him and his wife stayed at my place with my wife, and we were out at work, so I didn't really get to spend too much time with him. Got him out for a dive. He shot a kingfish 10 kilos, and he was frothing. He was over the moon, biggest fish he's ever shot. And prior to that, I said, do you know anything about going to Norway for halibut? Because I saw this photo of a guy with a halibut. I don't know what the guy's real name is, but I think it's Dan, but it's a very iconic Instagram photo that comes up. He's in the kelp rising up and the sun's beaming behind him. He's got a big slip tip holding out. I think it's a big halibut, and he's sort of looking up to the surface, and I looked at that photo one time, years and years ago. I was like, I want to go shoot one of those things. And I said, do you know much about it? And he's like, yeah, we can go there. One time, let's do a trip. And then I said, I'm moving to the UK. He's like, yeah, we'll do a trip when you come over. I was like, okay. And then he's like, I've been to Norway once, diving, shot a few cod, didn't see any halibut, really bad visibility. I was like, brilliant. I might do a little bit of research. And so I just sort of did a lot of research into time of year, where they live. I quickly worked out that the further north you go, the better chance you have of finding a big halibut. And yeah, it's just where they live, unfortunately. I've never dived in Norway south of the Arctic Circle, so quite far north. And yeah, I just picked a spot. I just watched a heap of videos online about the country, that they just looking at the bottom structure, looked at a lot of topographic topology. I get these two things confused, topology and topography. One of those, basically looking at topography, yeah, just sort of looking at the structure, what was diveable, bearing in mind that the water was going to be pretty cold, so I'm not going to be bombing 30 meters at all. And so my first trip I did, I met an Australian guy over here who's been over here for a bit over a decade, that I met at a pairs comp, because the British club paired us up because we were the anti-Bidian crew. So we became really good mates, and he said, oh yeah, I'd like to go to Norway and shoot a halibut. And we just chatted on the phone, and I found a fishing lodge that had just opened up. They'd never seen a diver before there. They'd just been doing fishing. It was an ex-commercial fishing sort of setup. They've got like a proper kill room that's just stainless steel floor into a drain into the ocean sort of thing, where they're just there to because they get the cod they sell to, I think, the Portuguese and the Spanish. I think they call it bacalhau, the salted codfish. I don't know if you get that in the States, but I'm not a big fan of it myself. It's very salty, but anyway, decided let's have a punt and go. We looked and found some spots, and my mate from Australia, Bryson, said, oh, I'm keen to go, and his missus came over as well. She dives, and yeah, there was 5 of us suddenly in Norway. They said, here's the keys to the boat, have fun, there's the fuel station over there, dock the boat up when you're done at the end of it and leave the keys in it in 6 days time. So it was a lot of people I know are like big fans of charter trips and that sort of stuff, and a lot of people ask me, oh, who did you go out with? I was like, oh, I just went by myself. Oh yeah, but who took you out? Who was you guys? Like, hey, we just had a punt. We just sort of went for it. It was part of the adventure, and we fully expected to go up there and not actually, like, oh, we don't even know if we're going to see a fish or anything like that. We were like, oh, we'll get heaps of cod, but incidentally, the further north you go, the less sort of easy it is to find lots of cod where you're looking for halibut. They're just in different things. If you're looking for halibut, you look for halibut. If you want to go shoot cod and pollock and that sort of thing, go shoot them. But you really have to focus. And I think the first day, because we had about a 4-hour drive from the airport, we're like, oh, we'll stop at some bridges on the way, we'll smash some cod, maybe get a halibut at the fishing lodge and meet the other guys there. We jumped in at these bridges, there's like whirlpools behind them from the current, and we didn't see a single fish worth shooting. I saw like an Arctic mink, like one of those little ottery furry rodent type things, like a kind of looks like a, what are those things? A ferret. It looks like a aquatic ferret looking thing. That's all I saw. I was like, oh, this is cool. Yeah, no fish. And we got back to the lodge and we were like, this might be a bit more difficult than we imagined. But we got out there, shot some cod and stuff on the first day, and just went looking for halibut where we look for flatfish, because we're quite familiar with finding flatfish in the UK. So we thought halibut's just a really big one, so we'll look in the same spots. And thus began 5 days of endless searching for a halibut.
So you finally got one, though?
I didn't get one that trip. No, not on the first trip. I shot some whopping big place. Right? Yeah, my friend Andrew on the second day that we actually looked for them. So the second day we had the boat, the Australian guy, we just looked. You've got miles of coastline. I think Norway's coastline is one of the largest in the world because of the amount of fjords and islands and all that sort of stuff. So its actual perimeter is insanely large. So you get out there and you look at a map on Google Maps, like, oh yeah, I'll just drift there. You get there and you're like, oh my goodness, this place is huge. How am I going to find anything here? And so we just we had one person in the boat, and you just sort of drop people off in a line and 400 meters apart with a float in pairs, and you drift, and then once they get to the spot the other person started, leapfrog them over. And I was in the water. I shot like a place or something like that because I was like, oh, that's a really big place, like 4 kilos. These things are delicious. And then I think Bryson came and picked me up. He said, oh yeah, Andrew's got a nice halibut. I was like, oh, take me over. I want to go see it. And he's just 76 kilo whopper that he said, oh, I was just cruising along this ledge that we'd spotted the day before. I said, oh, we should go back here. It looks pretty good. I've seen lots of flatties here, so there might be a big halibut. Yeah, he was just cruising down, sitting mid-water, saw a halibut swim under him. Shot at 76 kilos. Thanks for coming.
Wow. How was it fighting? Just real heavy fish, huh?
Oh, on the surface, they don't die. And I don't know if you've shot many flatfish, but locating the brain on a flatfish is slightly more difficult than a regular round type fish. So trying to put a spear into that, and obviously you want to be quite careful because 76 kilos of angry halibut is not something you want to be sort of dealing with in a boat if you can avoid it. Quite a dangerous sort of prospect to try and get that into a boat if it's too green. So
yeah, I can't imagine that. I mean, I've at work one time I was diving and I stabbed a halibut.
Oh, with the hally hammers.
Yeah. I was just this was actually like years ago, and I just had a poker because we were looking for buried stuff, and I just see this big set of eyes, and this, I didn't know how big it was. I stabbed it and it just seemed like the whole seafloor was like, whoa, whoa, whoa.
Yeah.
And I quickly was like, it was 33, like 15 kilos.
Yeah.
But I just had it and I was trying to get back to the surface, like with this thing. And I realized like maybe I'd, bitten off more than I could chew. But
they fight a lot harder than a typical roundfish, because a roundfish generally just has the tail to propel itself with, whereas a halibut, I don't know if you've seen one swim off, but they actually use the whole body to swim.
Yeah, right. It's just heavy. It's like trying to pull up a rug or something that wants to stay.
It doesn't take much to sort of kick your ass, really. And then I think the next day, Jose duffed one. He basically, you've probably seen the footage, but basically he sat on top of it with his little pea shooter gun for about 30 seconds, and then did a half-assed duck dive and shot it as it was taking off, and just pricked it. And the only thing that was sort of keeping it in the fish was the fact that he'd sort of shot it so damn square that it sort of, the pressure of it sitting in its skin was holding it in there, and I think it basically just pulled straight back out at the back of the tail. Didn't really do anything to the fish. And he was like, "Oh yeah, I lost a fish." And we saw the footage and we're like, oh my goodness. I've been swimming for 16 hours in 11 degree water, 11 degree C, sorry, for the States viewers. And I was just like, oh my goodness. And then I think the next day, we didn't see anything. And then one of the other day, the second last day, he shot that one that we mentioned before, and then he lost it. And then my friend Bryson found it. He saw he was on the bottom, and because my gun has pink reel line on it, and he's like, saw the gun just bobbing. He's like, huh, that's odd. And looks down the reel line like, oh, the big halibut attached to that. Boom. And then shot it, and a couple spears later got that in the boat. And then we're like, oh crap, we've done this section. So we moved somewhere else, and within, I don't know, like 5 minutes of being in the water, Jose's like, oh, I shot another halibut. It's a really bad shot. And I was like, are you freaking kidding me? Like, I haven't even seen one, and he's just shot another. He's like, oh, it's a bad shot. And I went down, and it was a bad shot. So I went down and finished it off for him. It was in about sort of 15 meters. But when you're sort of fighting against current, trying not to pull a spear out to get down there with a big, heavy lead belt and a lot of a thick wetsuit, 15 meters seems like the deepest dive you'll ever do. And yeah, so we got that in the boat, and it was great. And Nikki and I didn't have a fish yet, and the next day, we were unsuccessful in locating one, so had to go home. But I think it was really good. I think it was actually really good for me not to succeed in that. In hindsight, at the time I was like, oh, what? This sucks. But I think it was a really good lesson in obviously being humble and just knowing that, enjoying the experience for what it is, no matter what it was. And I think that was a real turning point for me, enjoying the diving over in Europe, because obviously Australia's and the tropics, you're spoilt for choice. You can pick whatever you can eat a different fish for dinner every day for a month, sort of thing, and you wouldn't run out of fish to shoot. But here in the UK, there's maybe like 5 things you want to eat, and I just thought, it doesn't matter what happens. It started becoming a little bit more about the adventure and where I was and appreciating it, because like northern Norway is one of the most beautiful places I've been in the world. I've been to Norway like 6 or 7 or 8 times or something like that. It's one of my most frequented countries I go to, only topped by France, I think, just because I'll go skiing there a bit. But it's I think that was a big turning point for what I wanted to do with my videos as well, and try and communicate to people that when you go out, you should just enjoy it for what it is, and not necessarily be so much about the fish. Like, the fish is the bonus. Because I remember, I don't know if you've ever been in this position, but maybe 7 or 8 years ago, when Facebook, fishing on Facebook was kind of getting big. Everyone would go out on the weekend. You look at on Sunday night, you're like, oh, who's shot what, and all this sort of stuff. And if I'd gone out on the weekend and I'm like, yeah, I had a great day and I was stoked with my catch, and I'd see someone else's fish, I'd be like, oh, I had a crap day. Look what they got, or where are they fishing, and all this. And
I talk about that a lot, actually. It's like a measuring contest, so to speak, right?
Yeah, like, I don't know who said it or where the quote's from, but it's sort of stuck with me a little bit, that the comparison is the thief of all joy. and something that I might be really stoked on, somebody else might not be, but it doesn't matter as long as I'm content with what I'm doing and happy. And I think that's it's a difficult place to be, especially in the day and age of social media, where you sort of compare everything's it's out for the open for people to compare and that sort of stuff. You see other people shooting fish, and that's also another reason why I thought this is really it sort of takes the fun out of it, because all you're doing is trying to outdo someone else, not actually having a great time yourself. So I thought to myself, well, if I can show people that going out and shooting a mullet at a pier in the UK gives me just as much joy as shooting a Spanish mackerel somewhere, I'd trade that. I would trade 50 Spanish mackerel for the feeling of shooting that mullet in a new country in waters I'd never dived before. It was such a euphoric feeling going, I've done something really cool here. I've gone way out of my comfort zone. I've lost count of how many Spanish mackerel I've shot. I'm not trying to big note myself, but for some people that's the only fish they want to shoot. But I'm like, cool, I've done that a lot. So I something is that
it's like yellowtail here or kingfish here. It's not really that hard to hunt, and kind of going back to what you were saying, where it was like you could shoot fish all the time, every fish a different day in Australia.
Yeah.
Here it's a little bit more similar to the UK in the sense that, like, I guess if you shifted your focus to smaller reef fish, you could shoot fish pretty consistently here, and we do. However, if you're looking for certain species of fish, you could go out every day and not see them, especially the sea bass, the white sea bass.
Yeah.
And I remember there was like 5 years there where I didn't see a white sea bass. Like, and I was calling my buddy. I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing wrong. It goes back to what you were saying. Like, he's like, look, you just don't see him when you start diving. You just don't see him. Your eye's not trained, and you don't really understand yet. And then, but then I had to learn. I got burnt out on diving, actually, and then I got back into it like a couple years later, just because I missed it. But it made me realize you just need to enjoy being in and I do. But I got so jaded and so focused on, like, this doesn't count unless I get a fish.
Unless I get a white sea bass, yeah.
Yeah, and it changed my whole now my friends laugh at me because I usually am one and done. I have a fish I want to shoot, and I'll go out and I shoot it, and I'm done.
I also a lot recently have taken a lot of pleasure in just taking a fish and being able to cook for other people, and sort of bringing that experience a little bit, a bit home and sharing it with other people, because it's sort of hard to communicate what you do and the feeling you get. But when I particularly enjoy hosting people and having people around, friends, family, etc., and being able to cook something that I've taken myself is quite special. And it doesn't really matter. People don't care if I shot a bass, a European bass, which is sort of the premier fish here, or if I shot a place that sits there and you can basically, I've picked these things up before, sort of thing. You don't even need to shoot them. No one cares how difficult it was, what your hunt was like. They care about you bringing something to the table and sharing the experience with them. So that was also another thing that got me, was because people don't understand what you actually do, or what I was doing as a hobby, and so making videos was another way of sharing the experience. And like what you were saying about the no fish thing, I oddly had a work trip to the northern end of Sweden, at the top of the Baltic Gulf there, for a client I had to go film for, and it was cheaper to fly to Finland than drive 3 hours. I was like, oh, great. And my work's really great with, me, if I want to shoot somewhere near the beach, they'll be like, oh, if you want to, stay and go for a dive, take your dive gear. Like, because I used to do a lot of work in Denmark, and I'd take my dive gear quite regularly and go diving in Denmark after work, which was great. But my friend Jose lives in Finland, and I knew he was going to be about 3 hours from this town. And I said, oh, hey, I've got this day off till about 4 in the afternoon. Let's go diving in the Baltic. And then he said, oh, the conditions aren't so great. Let's go to this lake. So we drove 2 hours towards Russia.
I saw that.
I was like, dude, where are you taking me? And I didn't see a single fish the whole thing. It was sleeting snow sort of stuff when we were getting in our wetsuits. And I thought, because I put a lot of effort into like making the video look nice, and I ummed and ahed about putting it out there because I thought, I've made this, gone to this effort, but I thought, you know what? This is kind of, for me, as real as it gets. You can plan a trip, you can go somewhere, you can make it all happen, all the stars have aligned, and the fish just aren't. You don't see a fish, like, oh. But that doesn't mean like it's not a fun trip or successful or anything. Like it's an amazing memory for me driving down those crazy country back roads of Finland with the orange trees all around you, because I don't get a lot of orange trees where I'm from in Australia. You're probably used to all the deciduous trees where you're from.
I mean, well, the West Coast doesn't. I mean, yeah, we have them. We got it right in San Diego, but yeah.
Yeah, you see autumnal colors quite often, but whenever I see them here, I'm just like, oh my goodness, this is so beautiful. And to just dive in this pristine lake, and yeah, it was cool. And I think a lot of people resonated with the fact that you go diving, it doesn't always work out that you get a fish, but that doesn't make it any less fun. So,
well, what's funny about that video, like you're talking about it, is I remember that video. Like I watched it, I remember it. I don't remember. I remember, yeah, you look down. I remember like a snippet of it was all murky and there's some sticks and stuff.
Yeah,
but I remember. Because I think, like you said, everybody can relate to it for the most part, of especially some of the places I had to dive for work, being cold, getting out. Like, and I remember in your video it was snowing, and I was like, wow, that's a trip, because those trips sometimes, well, it's all about the journey, but it's high risk, high reward. But it's a moment like that diving has kind of pulled you all together. Like, so I actually kind of talked about that, I think, on the Facebook, on the Facebook group. What does everybody want to see more? And they're like, the journey, the journey. And so I'm going to try to do that this year because, I mean, you've inspired me. You've gotten into the whole video thing, right? As far as like your job, and you learn, you said you were self-taught for the most part in the beginning. Do you have any recommendations, like gear recommendations? I know on your videos you have the links and things like that.
The easiest thing, obviously, is just to start on a GoPro. But the biggest thing, I think, that separates a lot of videos that are very watchable versus something that's okay is the sound quality. And that's just something that I've tried to become a bit of a stickler for, trying to get good sound quality, because sometimes you hear people talking through a GoPro and they're talking softly because they're not really used to talking on a camera, and they don't look, you can't hear it, you don't really know what's going on. It's not particularly engaging. If you are going to talk to a camera, you really got to look down the barrel, because that's where the connection is. Particularly, when you have a conversation with another person, you talk through the eyes, you maintain eye contact. You know somebody's looking at you because you see their eyes looking at you. If you're in a crowd and nobody's looking at you or looking at your eyes, you don't notice them, because that's where the connection is made between people and many other animals as well. You'd probably notice if you look straight in the eyes of a fish, that they're onto you. They're like, oh, this person's looking at me. So you see some people putting their hand over their mask and looking through the slit of their fingers right before they pull the trigger, sort of thing, or mirrored lenses on your mask and that sort of thing. Poker players, they wear glasses so you can't see, because that's where the connection is between two people, is through the eyes mostly. So I would say if you're gonna talk to a camera, talk to the camera as it's a person on FaceTime or something like that. And the audio is probably the big thing. So particularly with GoPros, you have to take them out of the housing to get any decent audio, which is unfortunate because then they're only waterproof to 10 meters. But I would say if you want to talk to camera, make sure the audio sounds good. Go somewhere quiet. Don't do it on the beach where there's waves crashing and that sort of stuff. So that's probably my biggest thing that frustrates me in my professional life as well, is bad audio. I'm like, oh no, I can't stand listening to this. So,
do you have any tips on how to clean up like audio, or any software?
There is like some sound removal stuff, but then again, it always destroys part of the sound of your voice, like the warmness of your voice as well. And I think the biggest thing is getting as close as you can to a microphone. The further you are away from the microphone, attenuation, and it doesn't sound as good. So if I can get a 3,000 pound microphone at work and stick it 6 foot away from you, and it's going to sound like crap. If I stick it 6 inches away from your mouth, it's going to sound absolutely unbelievable. So it's all about closeness for the audio anyway. Yeah, and then the other thing is, I guess when you come to editing your videos, is having the mix right between, if you've got a music track behind, you want to dip that track down when you're talking, so you're not sort of fighting to hear. I see that quite often, that somebody's talking and they've got music, and I'm like, I just can't concentrate on what you're saying because you're competing with something else. So that's one thing I'd say. But yeah, GoPro is a great place to start. It's waterproof. You can take it underwater. You can take a nice still image on it as well as video. Yeah, it's a good place to start, really, and you probably won't cry if you drop it.
Well, I gotta give a little plug to the company I work with. It's Akaso, and they're like, I gotta say, like, for the most part, it's fairly comparable to a GoPro, but they're like $100, and I've had a fish, swatted off my head. I lost it, and I was more upset by the footage, losing the footage.
Oh, I've had shocking moments with that.
But the point is, like, it was only $100, so I was able to get it, no problem. But I think that difference between buying a GoPro and buying the camera, and I could buy a new set of fins or go on another trip or something. Like, I'm always trying to figure out.
It is a hard thing to justify, and I think some people are, they're just passionate about making videos and recording their memories as well, and some people just aren't into it at all. They're not interested. They're like, oh yeah, cool, I like watching videos, but I don't have a desire to do it myself. And I think you mentioned in some earlier questions, is for people starting out a channel, I would say that you don't have to have all the gear. I've built up camera gear over 5 years of just buying bits and pieces, trial and error, and that sort of stuff, to where I am now, where I can I'm happy with the stuff I make now. It could be better. It always could be better. But yeah, I think the important thing with the YouTube channel is, I get this question quite a lot. It's like, how do I start a YouTube channel? It's like, that's exactly it. You just have to start, because the reality is, the first video you make is going to be crap. The 10th video you make might be slightly less crap. I look back at some of my earlier videos, even maybe 2 years ago, where I'm in this exact room, and I just got, like, my colors look terrible, my lighting's horrid, I can't speak properly on camera as well.
I've had to learn a lot about.
Interesting skill, though, too, is actually getting used to talking to a camera and being yourself in front of a camera, because it feels awkward.
I think the most awkward part is when you come back to edit your own voice and then realize you say words very stupidly. For instance, when someone's in a rush. Okay, cool. What is this a bottle of?
Water.
WADER. Like, there's a T in there. Why do we? Most people say water, or like, I jumped in the water. Like, it actually sounds really stupid when you go back to edit it. It's water. It's you become really hyper aware of what your language use is like as well. How much you have pauses, for instance. How you use punctuation, grammar. How you draw people in with your inflection. There's that age-old sort of Australian questioning inflection, where if I say the sky's blue, where I put an inflection on the end, where it means it sounds like a question. Where if I say the sky is blue, that's a statement. So there's heaps of stuff you can sort of dig into about how to speak to a camera, or just speaking in general. And I've watched a few. I have to admit, I've definitely watched a few videos on speech and how you communicate using your hands, your speech, how to be engaging and not be boring, how to change your voice to not be boring as well. I'd like to think I'm less boring than I was 24 months ago. That's probably the hardest thing for people.
There's the other side of it too, where if you watch yourself and you're like for me, I know that I didn't notice that, but my lip or whatever kind of sags over here versus over here. It's funny because I'm like, oh, that's really annoying me.
Yeah.
What? There's a certain, it's like the best thing you can do for a self-evaluation is film yourself.
Yeah,
and then you're going to have to get real comfortable with your imperfections and just go with it, because, or try to watch what you say. And I always encourage
Definitely.
people to like get those comments back from people that say like, you say this every, whatever it is. It's like, and they're always like, please don't be mad or something like, I don't care. I appreciate the input because this is for you guys. Like,
Yeah,
yeah,
definitely. When I listen to podcasts as well, I often hear the language that people use, and I find people from the west coast of America use the phrase a lot as almost it's a form of punctuation. Instead of pausing, you slip that in there as a way of ending a sentence and going on to another sort of thing. It's extremely interesting once you sort of start filming yourself, and gets quite scary because you realize, why do I say things that I do?
yeah. They actually told me that at work because I started instructing people, and they're like, you say,
A
that's
lot.
hilarious. I had no idea. That's
You don't have any idea until you do it.
yeah, yeah. So kind of wrap things up. What's next for you? Like, what you have any trips planned, or like any going back to Tonga or any other islands, Solomon Islands or anywhere? Or?
Living in the UK, it's quite difficult and expensive to get to that part of the world, the South Pacific areas where it's Dogtooth Town and all that sort of stuff. There's Africa. I haven't really gone too much there because I'm sort of focusing on Europe because it's just a lot cheaper to get to for me at the moment. I did actually have the privilege of going to Timor-Leste last Christmas, just before Christmas, for a month for a documentary for work, and it was about whales and cetaceans and that sort of stuff. And so I was getting to dive every day for a month, which was amazing, and fly a drone off a boat chasing big fat whales around. And hopefully there might be another trip on the cards for that. So if I do go back there, I might try and take a spear gun with me because there was a lot of fish there.
Where was that? You said?
Timor-Leste. So if you go to West Papua and then you find Timor, and like if you go Bali, Komodo, Timor, it used to be called East Timor, but the technical name, the official name now is Timor-Leste, which means Timor of the East. It's the youngest nation in Indonesia at the moment. Ex-Portuguese colony. So hopefully I might go back there on a work trip, which would be fun. But I think locally, going back to Norway in a couple months in the springtime, something that I don't have a lot of confidence in. Where because I've been twice for halibut, I've been successful the second trip, and we've always done those in the autumn because the reasoning is most people would say I'm going to go in the middle of summer to the north of Norway because it's going to be the most warm, which is true, but because it's 24/7 daylight north of the Arctic Circle, the marine plants go absolutely insane, and so you get really bad blooms and algae and that sort of stuff in the water. From it's basically you've got a hydroponic setup for your kelp and other marine plants there, so the visibility can be really poor on the surface. So normally we go in the spring. I've been in September, visibility was okay. Been in October, it cools down a bit and the visibility is much better. But this time we're not going for halibut, we're going for these migratory Atlantic cod that come out from the depths of the Atlantic in springtime to spawn, and that's the time of the year that they catch the world record cod. So I think they've caught them to the place we're going, caught them 50 kilograms,
which is
a massive Atlantic cod. There's one spot in Norway that a lot of divers go called Saltstraumen, which is the world's strongest tidal current. People, you can any day of the week you can go there and find a 15-20 kilo cod. They're quite common. If you go there, you're going to get a big cod, but they're not the true gargantuan fish that do appear out in other parts of the world. So expected water temperature is 4 degrees Celsius, which is
It's cold.
it's not very warm at all. I'm going to say less than tropical, but it should make for a really nice video because hopefully it's still covered in snow everywhere there. And so you have to go in the early spring because if you go late spring, the snow melts and then the visibility goes. So yeah, it's all those things you have to think of when you go somewhere to dive. Going to Italy next weekend to visit my friend Giuliano, and he's going to take me diving out of Rome. My wife was sick of me whinging about not going diving, so for Christmas she got me a dive trip anywhere. So I think I got return flights to Rome for 60 quid with luggage. So going to go there and hopefully try and shoot anything as as if you've dived in the Mediterranean, you know it's a very humbling experience. So
I've heard you're diving to 30 meters to shoot a fish that's 12 inches long or something like that.
Yeah, in the wintertime, though, they've assured me that it's less than 6 meters for sea bass and gilthead brim and that sort of stuff. So hopefully I can shoot something, or at least film somebody shoot something else. So that'd be cool. My wife's 30th birthday in the summer as well, so we're going to be in Italy somewhere for a week, so might do some more diving then. There's the World Championship in Sardinia in September as well, so I don't know if I'll be on the British team for that. Don't know if I'd be capable of diving the depth there to actually shoot anything, but I'd be pretty keen to go and film it. So
with all this travel though, do you have how do you bring your spear guns, or do you have any issues with that? Because I know certain countries, like I know Europe's pretty good, but do you have like a certain bag you like to bring your stuff with? Or
I borrow my brother-in-law's sport tube that he uses for his skis, because generally when I'm diving, it's the summer and he's not skiing, so it's like one of those hard cases sort of things.
That's what I have as well. Yeah.
The only problem that I've found with it is it weighs 4.5 kilos off the bat. So most European airlines only give you 20 kilos. And if it's a good one, they might give you 23. So I take that. I can fit a couple of guns in there, fins, and most of the time with weights, I carry them on. Just my dive weights. I leave them on the belt. I take my knife off my belt and leave that in there. And I generally put my mask in my carry-on bag as well, because it's quite loose. A lot of the regulations about weight restrictions for carry-on baggage in Europe, the general rule is you must be able to lift it unassisted into the overhead locker. So I've become nearly unstuck once. I think it was last September. I was going to Denmark for Euro Africa Championships, and I had 6 dive weights in there, so 6 kilos of weight. I had 2 camera bodies, 4 lenses, a aluminium underwater housing for one of those, for a DSLR type thing. I had a glass dome port in an aluminium housing, all in my carry-on like wheelie bag. And yeah, they pulled like the red alert on at when it goes through the scan, and I had my laptop. I pulled my laptop out, sir, but they said, "Oh, we need the manager to see this." They wouldn't even let it go through down to open it up without seeing something. Someone's pressed the red alert. This is definitely an IED or something like that, and IAD or whatever it is. And I'm like, "Oh, hey, that's my bag up there." They're like, "What's in it?" I was like, "Some dive stuff." They're like, "Huh." They like unpack the whole thing, but I got to carry it on. Otherwise, I think the bag weighed like 16 kilos. So I probably stretched it.
Would it fit in the overhead compartment, or?
Yeah, it was a standard size, just because it had heavy crap in it, like lenses and lead weights and that sort of stuff. So I don't encounter too many troubles flying with dive gear. I just say it's fishing equipment. And I've actually recently got off my mate Tim. He's let me borrow his Rife Euro traveller gun, which breaks down into it. I don't know if you've seen those, the spear unscrews and stuff.
Yeah.
I used that in Scotland last year. And
did you like it?
It's quite heavy because it's got the steel rods in the middle of it. But I'm also used to shooting a carbon fiber pea shooter here in the UK. I use an 80 or an 85 or something like that. That's carbon fiber, 6.5mm spear and a single rubber. You know, you can pull the trigger and like it's really easy to move around. You don't even notice you're shooting it. But when you get a Rife Euro, you know, they're quite a beefy gun. So, well,
it's funny because a Rife Euro, like for us West Coast divers, like we carry the gigantic,
what's with that? Why do you need such firepower? Is that just the America?
It's like,
God bless America. This is my right to have a big ass gun. I've seen some of the things that people use for white sea bass. Like these massive 4 rubber things, slip tips, mid handles, like 72-inch. I'm like, that thing is huge. You could kill a whale with that. And I'll probably just go.
My wife said when I showed her, like, I made one of those monstrosities, and she's like, "What are you gonna shoot a whale?" I'm like, "Well, you know, if it lines up right, I guess. I don't know." No,
whale's delicious, actually.
Yeah, I'm sure you've had up in Norway, right? Or?
Yeah, I've tried it up there. Tastes quite good. It's absolutely a cultural thing, because for many people in the world, dog is, you know, it's not a problem to eat a dog. And apart from the, you know, culture of Western societies where they're domesticated animals, like it's a food source. Or people eat all sorts of weird stuff, and that's okay. Like people eat weird cuts of pork and that sort of stuff in Germany and all that, that most people wouldn't touch. Or like you think about the amount of cheese that comes out of France, all the stinky stuff that people, most people wouldn't touch it, but this is what they live on, and that's what they
there's
like.
countries I've been to where dogs, and I have 2 dogs right here, and I love dogs, but they're not domesticated normal dogs. They're like in the Middle East, these places, like they're packs of dogs that are like carnivorous, like non-domesticated dogs. It's wild dogs.
Yeah, for sure.
So yeah, but not to get off topic or anything, but it's just a good idea to remember that when you travel, like I know you do, and people just need to think about that, like before you condemn someone,
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
Italy, when I go there, when I got there last year, they said, oh yeah, we're or the year before, sorry, rather. Oh yeah, we're going for a barracuda hunt today. I was like, great, barracuda. Not something I would ever consider even shooting in Australia because it's got such a stigma about it, about the eating qualities. But I shot one, we ate it in a pasta, a bucatini. It was absolutely sensational. And I was like, huh. And that kind of changed my mentality a little bit on what's an acceptable fish to eat as well. There's a lot of people over here in the UK, there's a thing called a ballan wrasse, and they're dumb as what comes out of their backside. They're not a smart fish. And there's heaps of them. They're not commercially fished. They're in the shallows, and they grow a couple of kilos is a whopper, and they're easy to shoot. And everyone said, oh, they're inedible. Only the French will eat those, la, 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 la. And I was like, oh, huh. The French have some really nice food that I actually really enjoy. I'm going to try one. I cut it up, took the sides off it, ate it, and I was like, it's probably one of the best fish I've eaten in the UK. And I was just thinking, how crazy is this, that there's this culture of this is a terrible fish and it's inedible. So yeah, I think everyone should try fish, and I think traveling to new places and seeing what other people eat, it's opened my eyes a little bit about my fish snobbery as such, about what is acceptable and what's not acceptable to eat. But I think if you're a good cook, you can make pretty much most fish taste all right. Some fish are probably not ideal, but you can still eat them. And it's better, in my opinion, to spread your hunting over multiple species than it is just hammering the same thing over and over again.
Agreed.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, it keeps you in the water every season. Like no matter what, you always can come home with something. And
Definitely
cook it right, because every fish you can kind of cook a little differently too. But
yeah, you just got to experiment and be prepared that you might not have a great meal, and you might have to order a takeout curry one night if you really balls it up.
Well, it's interesting because I feel like you learn a lot of that stuff when you go to these countries where people are truly still dependent on the fish. Yeah. So they don't really care about stigmas or not. They need to eat.
Yeah, and they make it taste good.
Yeah, and I've seen that with a lot of smaller, like little tropical islands I've been to, where some guys just hanging out. It's like, oh yeah, we eat that. I'm like, you do? Okay.
Yeah, I saw some of that going in Timor as well, like little giant trevally and that sort of stuff, little squirrel fish. I was like, oh my goodness, what am I eating here? And then I'm at this little dinky restaurant, if you could call it a restaurant, and I was like, oh, this tastes actually really, really nice. Huh? Maybe I'm sort of not as smart as I think I am.
Yeah, the squirrel fish is pretty good, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, it's I quite like going to those new places, seeing how other people do things, and I think it always makes you a better person and a better diver to go somewhere and get humbled by a local and then learn from it. As frustrating as it might be in the moment, you can always look back and learn something from it. So that's what I enjoy doing, and hopefully this year's full of a bit more of that, and I can hopefully try and share some of those experiences with the rest of the world, and they can maybe learn something from it as well.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing the videos. Yeah, the travels.
We'll see.
I really appreciate you taking the time with the time difference and everything, and talking.
That's not a problem. Not a problem at all.
I love it. And if you ever get a chance to come out to San Diego, we'll put you on some tuna, hopefully. Or
I'd love to do that. Or the white sea bass.
Yeah. I'd love to. It'd be awesome.
Although I might have to go out with someone else other than you for a white sea bass if I want to see one, given your 5-year drought.
Oh, yeah. That was years ago. But yeah. Yeah. So when you first start diving, they don't call them white ghosts for nothing. Like,
Yeah, for sure. Oh well, hey, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being on the show. I appreciate it.
Cheers.
Thanks.